This meeting is being recorded. Okay, number one item on the agenda is acknowledgement receipt of correspondence. Helene, I believe we were copied on a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Durkin to the ZBA on 2 Harbor Street.
Correct.
Is that the only correspondence? Is that all we received?
There is a letter from the Waterways Department about a project that's being done that it has not come to us yet. It was in the box and I left it to be put into a PDF. I was hoping we'd get it. You don't need to do anything until April 3rd, but it will be coming. It is a letter from the Waterways Department of the state.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you, Helene.
so it's in town hall. It's not here because I was waiting for it to become a PDF before I could send it around.
Sounds good. Thank you. We'll wait for that.
Mhm.
At this time, we'd like to invite the public to speak on any items that are on the agenda with a limited time.
Ron, this is Mary. Do we list all correspondence to planning board or just what Helene received? Because there was one from a Lorraine Iavani.
I didn't see that.
I didn't see that.
It was listed to all of the members. You were on that, Ron, and I believe the town planner.
Well, I didn't see it, so I'm very sorry, but I have not received it.
So yeah, just I guess a process question. Do correspondence need to come to Helene to be recognized?
It should go to Helene. If it comes to me in the new system, I've been forwarding that stuff to Helene. It might have slipped through the cracks. I'll see if it came to my Manchester address and I will forward it on again.
Yeah, it's your Manchester. I'm just looking at it now. So it's your Manchester address and it was February 23rd.
Okay, I'll look for that. Thank you. Okay, at this time, the planning board would invite any public comments for items that are not on the agenda within a limited time limit. Is there any comments from the public? Okay, our first item on the agenda is a presentation by the town's DPW director, Chuck Dam, on section 6.11. This was brought to our attention from planning board member Christina Delicio. At this time, I would turn this presentation over to Mr. Dam, followed by some questions from the board.
All right, hello, everybody. I was just looking to share my screen just so you guys can kind of, I'll walk you through some of the stuff. I did receive some questions on more than just the 6.11. Ron, do you want me to just start with 6.11 or give you kind of an overview of water and wastewater?
I think an overview might be good, Chuck, so we can get that. It might eliminate some questions. It might clarify some things.
So can everybody see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I have the DPW reports and information website right now on. Is that what everybody's seeing? Okay.
Yep.
So, just to give kind of I'll try and run through it as quick as possible. Obviously, I'm going to skip over a lot, and if there's any questions, I guess we'll just wait to the end. But I think the most of what people are looking to find out about it, I think, is on the wastewater side specifically, and then probably a little bit on the water side. So I think the crux of that is that right now, currently, the town is under a consent order with DEP and EPA, specifically on the wastewater system we had reached our 80% capacity of the treatment plant. This is back in 2013. And when you trigger that 80%, that's when of your
8% of our permit level, sorry.
Of our permit level, they start to take notice and they start to wonder what you're going to do if you get to 100%, because obviously if you go over 100%, you have a lot of issues. So that's kind of where the whole process starts. And when you get to that 80%, they start asking you questions, and you have to have documented kind of responses and plans of what you're going to do so that you don't get to your 100% level of your permit. So that's really what the consent order boiled down to. And so one of the things they look for is your comprehensive wastewater management plan, of which in 2013, the town did not have one. Another thing they look for is, how are you going to reduce your flows in your collection system? And that is directly related to the II, which is the infiltration and inflow in your system. Infiltration and inflow has to do with the groundwater and rain and, basically the clean water that's coming down from the sky, getting into your dirty water collection system, and then therefore taking up excess capacity at your treatment plant, so that during those wet weather events, you don't have enough capacity in your treatment plant. So, in general, that's what they're looking for. The town did not have a comprehensive wastewater management plan. So we had to do one, which is a very thick, long document that costs a lot of money, where you have a consultant, in this case, CDR McGuire, go through and evaluate your entire wastewater system. And on top of that, they evaluate your town and your build out, and where you have on-site septic systems and where you have potential expansions and so on and so forth. And so it's a really long, involved document. So the part of our consent order was to submit this to DEP and to have them approve it, and then to start implementing some of the plans and some of the study information that was done to start implementing it throughout town. So I'll get back to that a little bit later, but then the second part of the consent order, which the consent order is part of the comprehensive wastewater management plan, but I also have, this is the consent order that we have. And they lay out several different things, what you did wrong, what you have to do to correct it. And they want basically a schedule for how you're going to correct it. And so in our case, that had to do with identifying the II problems that were in the system that caused us to get to our 80% capacity, and then to address them. And so, some of the things that we've been doing around town in the past, 8 years now, 2013 is when this was implemented, is, rehabbing the sewer, lining projects, manhole repairs. Basically, the whole system, had holes, and we needed to patch the holes. So that culminated in this past year, might even been 2 calendar years ago, but the Harbor Loop project, which was the kind of last piece. So this is a map of our entire collection system. And so this red line down here is the Harbor Loop. This pink line goes around the inner harbor, comes around to Town Hall, and then ultimately the treatment plant out back. And so that was, kind of the last big project that was identified in the town's consent order for repair as part of the II plan that the town had to put together to address this consent order. And once we were done with that, we could go back to DEP and say, here we are, we've done all this work. Here's our new flows and how the system's been doing. And at that time we were asking them to lift the consent order. And also we had submitted our comprehensive wastewater management plan. And so we were hoping that they would say, okay, you've done work. If you get to 80% capacity in the future, you'll just refer to your CWMP, pick another project off the shelf and go forward with that. And, obviously they're going to want us to submit back to them what's going on and what we're doing, but, there's no consent order at that place. So we can kind of chart our own path forward with the collection system and potential expansions. So part of the consent order is that there are no allowable extensions of the collection system. So this colorful area here is the town sewer system. As you can see, going into West Manchester, there's no sewer collection system. It's all on-site systems. You can't see it on this map, but Smiths Point, Eaglehead, out towards Eastern Manchester, like Raymond Street and Ocean Street, and then north of 128, what people are now calling the LCD, and potential 40B project or the MAC, all these things. Those are all on private septic systems. They have nothing to do with the town collection system. Now, as part of the CWMP, there was a recommended plan of, potentially picking up some of these areas as potentially connecting to the collection system and being an expansion, but we're not there yet. We still have the consent order in place. It hasn't been done. And so that's kind of where we stand with the consent order. Now I will update one more thing, so beyond doing all that work, we submitted our post monitoring plan to DEP. We showed them, what we are at with our new flows, and they've actually come back to us and said, we want to see more. There's still, there's analysis that were done with our II and how much more II was left in the system, which had to do with metering the collection system during wet weather events. And so we've actually been issued in this time frame a new NIPDES permit, which is our permit with EPA that allows us to discharge into the harbor, the treated effluent from the treatment plant. And that comes down to our 12-month rolling average flows. So the number that I mentioned to you guys before was the 80% of the capacity is where we kind of triggered this consent order in the past. So to put specific numbers on it, our permitted allowable flow is 0.67 million gallons per day. 80% of that is 536 million gallons per day. What this chart shows is our previous, that goes from current time, January of 21, back 3 or 4 years. And you can see we never, in this past 3 or 4 years, we've never gone above the 80%. So that means that the work that we did on the collection system worked. We haven't, our 12-month rolling average is below our permit level. It's actually even getting better as we've done more projects. We're now down around the 430,000 gallons per day, 12-month rolling average. So considerably under our 0.67 million gallons per day permit limit and considerably under the 80% threshold, which they obviously pay attention to. So that's where we're at. So to me, that means that the excess capacity we have before we get to the 80% limit where they'll be looking at us is roughly 220,000 gallons per day. That's increasing our flows by almost 50% over what they are today. So back to the map, if you look at this sewage area, which is mostly residential as the town is, we can increase this by 50% and still mostly be under our permit level. Now, obviously, if we do and we start connecting all of these different study areas and additional flows, we have to, again, worry about creating a system where we have holes in it or we don't keep up with it. And so, there's certainly a maintenance aspect to you can't just allow people to connect in perpetuity, but, there is available flow there. Now, in the CWMP, they outlined these potential new areas of expansion. And they even said in the CWMP, some of them, lend themselves to on-site systems. So not collecting, not extending the sewer collection system. Some of them lend themselves more to extending the collection system. So I'll let you guys go back and read it if you want, but in general, I think they're looking at the LCD as being somewhere where they would likely expand the connections. Also West Manchester out by Harbor Street, and then maybe Smith's Point. It remains to be seen. I don't think anybody, nobody's come to my office saying, hey, when's the town going to extend the collection system? But, that's what was outlined in the CWMP. Now, another aspect of us asking DEP to lift the consent order was they said that they actually have not approved our CWMP. So that as part of the consent order, DEP held the basically right to review our CWMP and approve it. It was submitted to them in 2016, and the town and our consultant thought that DEP approved it. They think otherwise. So there's still, like I said, we're still kind of working out some of the finer points of the consent order and getting it lifted. But I would say that, it's generally in the works, as you can see on the 12-month rolling average. We've done a lot of good work getting back to a reasonable, place in our collection system.
Do
and our
do you
treatment.
think that last year is a little bit COVID related? No restaurants in service? Is this
I don't
skewing that
really
number?
run, because, I have actually been in the process of doing on the water side, the ASR, and which is the annual statistical report that we submit to DEP for the water system. And the numbers of consumption for the water side actually went up marginally, especially in last spring and summer. So I don't think it's, directly correlated to COVID and, up or down. You would think the more water that has been pumped from the reservoir and from the treatment plant would represent a larger flow collected and sent to the wastewater treatment plant for treatment. So I'm still kind of, hashing through the data and trying to, make some of my own kind of conclusions, but I haven't quite got there. But it doesn't seem to be directly correlated with COVID. To get back to the question of 6.11 and where it came from in 1989, I assume at that point the treatment plant wasn't really a treatment plant, and by today's standards, there was probably issues in the harbor with water quality, just like, on a much smaller scale, just like Boston or Beverly, SESD, Gloucester. So they, in the subsequent years and decades even, they added secondary treatment at the wastewater treatment plant. They, refined the treatment process, no longer just directly, back in the 80s, they were probably just screening the grit and pumping the rest out into the harbor. So, so I think they've made lots of strides. So I think that's probably what they were trying to accomplish in 1989. Our permit has been renewed for the wastewater treatment plant a couple of times since the treatment plant's gone online. So, in general, I think if you're looking at issuing these bylaws or codifying the bylaws, certainly there needs to be some mechanism to, limit connections and extensions. There's got to be some town-wide approval process to, do an extension. I will say that DEP is looking for us to follow the CWMP as a roadmap for these things. So if there were, I don't know that one exists, but if there were another place in town that needed sewer and it wasn't identified in the CWMP as a place to be expanding the collection system, we would need to modify the document, modify the CWMP, and submit that to DEP for approval. So there's several pieces of this process, I think, from my perspective, that need to be implemented or need to be thought out before we just remove the language of 6.11 in the bylaw. So I think that's generally most of what I wanted to say on the wastewater side. Let me just see if I have any other. I think that's generally what I want to say on the wastewater side. On the water side, we have similar, responsibilities with DEP. So we are a registered system. I just switched my map to the, to the water system. Our treatment plant is up on Gravelly Pond. We have the well down in Lincoln Street. So, together, the surface water plant makes up about 60% of our usage. 40% comes from the well on a typical year. Our permit level, our limit is, or registered, I should say, it's not a permit, it's a registration that we have with DEP, is 0.72 million gallons per day, which equates to about 262 million gallons a year. Part of that registration, see if I can pull it up. Part of that, so this is now looking at our registration with DEP. Part of that, they do allow us to go over that registration limit by 100,000 gallons per day. So that's where no withdrawal in excess of 100,000 gallons per day over the registered volume. So that gets us up to 0.82 million gallons per day, which is almost 300 million gallons in a given year. Like I said, we do an ASR every year, which is our annual statistical report with DEP. You can see, so these are our numbers. Previous year, I think it's actually down here. It's a different metric. So right here, we were about 0.73. This is in calendar year 2019. So we were about 10,000 gallons a day average over our registered volume, but well under the 100,000 gallon per day buffer that they give us. But there's a lot more that goes into it besides just looking at the last number on the meter. We also have what we call unaccounted for water, which in 2019 was 23.7%. So just to give you an idea, when I first came to town in 2017, or I came to town in 2018, but we were doing the 2017 ASR, our unaccounted for water at that time was 34%. So that means for every, in this case, round up to 25%, 1 out of every 4 gallons that we take out of the reservoir, we're not really sure where it goes. It doesn't get registered at a meter on the usage side. So, your meters in your house that your water bill is based off of, we're losing 25% of that from where it gets made to where it gets consumed. So I've been working hard on trying to figure out where that is. A reasonable, our permit level or registration level, I should say, calls us for us to be somewhere in between 10 and 15%. So, we are trending better, but we're not quite there yet. But because we're under the 0.72 threshold, it really hasn't become a problem. But if we do go over the 0.82 threshold, we had better start looking a lot harder. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves in a consent order on the water side. So that's what I'm trying to head off. There are certainly areas that we suspect we have issues, but as you can see from this map, all of this red pipe or red lines is pipe that was installed pre-1900. So over 120 years old. So those pipes are leaking, and that's why we have a high unaccounted for water. So all these blue lines are lines that we've been replacing since we've got here and that's, I think, a lot of the reason why we've seen it go from 34% unaccounted for water down to 23 that we're at now. And I think we'll find similar gains as we do some of the additional pipeline. So to give you an idea, this is what these pipes look like when we replace them. So this is probably a 6-inch or maybe an 8-inch pipe, and it probably has roughly 2 or 3 inches of diameter on the inside. Our project this past summer was this was actually Boardman Ave, and we put a liner through the pipe, a structural liner. So I have this coupon in my office, but this is basically what the pipe looks like after we got done with the lining, or that's basically what a brand new pipe would look like if we replaced a pipe. So we've had to start, because this is all 120-year-old pipe, and we live in a coastal environment with aggressive soils and salt water, groundwater. We had to replace Boardman Ave, we had to replace Ocean Street, we had to replace Raymond Street, because the pipe is just Swiss cheese after 120 years of being in a saline environment. And that's where we were going to get the most bang for our buck in fixing some of these issues. We also have a long history of breaks in some of these areas, and so that's what we're trying to renew as we do these additional water projects. And you can see the red is all pre-1900 pipe. We have a lot of it, and that's why we have issues with unaccounted for water. That's why we potentially have issues with water quality, and that's why we're trying to replace them. So I think that's generally what I wanted to say on the water side. Since I've been in town and Nate is on the call, town engineer, we've been, addressing these issues with our capital planning. On the water side, we've been spending, roughly $1 million a year to complete some of these projects. On the wastewater side, before I got here, I think we were spending, $500,000 here, $500,000 there. The Harbor Loop was certainly another $500,000 project. But we still have some places to go. And we've been looking at, $200,000 or $300,000 projects continuing, at the wastewater treatment plant and, keeping up with the collection system. DP is going to want to see that before they lift our consent order, that we are committed to continuing this process and finding these problems and fixing them. I think we've made that argument. So, I'm not overly concerned about that. I think that's it. I think in my upcoming budgets, we have, still some $1 million projects on the water side and wastewater, but, we are trying to get to a point where we just have $200,000 or $300,000 a year that we're spending on these capital projects. I guess the last thing I'll say is just to bring it home on the wastewater treatment plant side. It's certainly an older plant. A lot of the equipment inside is, showing its age, and we've been replacing it. That's where, like I said, we're spending a couple $100,000 a year. I will bring up on the DPW website, I have all these project or reports that have been done, available. Anybody can click on them and see, but on the wastewater treatment plant side, this is the evaluation that we had done by Tate and Howard on the wastewater treatment plant. It lays out all the issues that we have. I mean, there's several different sets of pumps and equipment, and I do have a standing offer with all of the selectmen and the FinCom, and I'll give it to the planning board now. But if you want a tour of the wastewater plant, it's you'll get the flavor real quick on how this all works and what we're trying to accomplish down there. But this report will walk you through all the different requirements, all the different sizing, and then at the end, obviously it has the capital plan that they laid out. In this case, it was short-term, long-term, different projects. I will say this didn't lay them out in a specific order or how to group them together. My thought process is that when things break, we certainly have to fix them, and we do. But it would behoove the town and us to do one big project where we bite off $3 or $4 million at once and use one contractor that's responsible for all that work, rather than doing a $30,000 set of pumps here and a $40,000 grit classifier there. Those kind of projects are fine when we have to, but I think we'll see some economy of scale if we have one contractor responsible for all the work, and we'll get a little bit better contractor than some of these smaller people that are just doing a one-off thing for us. So the other thing is obviously the wastewater treatment plant itself is right on the inner harbor. There's certainly reports and studies that have been done outlining the effects of climate change and potentially having things underwater. So we are always looking at ways of fortifying the site, as well as flood proofing critical equipment like the pumps and the electrical services and MCCs and all the stuff that goes into that project. So now I really do think I can take any questions, but that I do want to get that in there. The treatment plant is not going to magically disappear overnight. It's not going to break down overnight, but it will always be a constant area of concern where we need to hold our breath when the big storms come, and we need to replace equipment that has come to the end of its useful life, just like anything. But obviously this is a very critical piece of infrastructure for the town. So With that, anything I missed or
Yeah.
that people
Yeah.
want me to dive in on, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, thanks,
whatever you
Chuck.
think.
Yeah, I'll take, anybody from the board have a question?
Ron,
Yes, Mr. Coons.
Chuck, on that 220,000 surplus sewage capacity, what would be a guess on how many dwellings that would handle if that were the case?
Well, like I said, so it's about, that's saying that, our current system is, I'm gonna get the number wrong, but it is in the CWMP. I think it's somewhere approaching 1,000 dwelling units. So if we were to
Yeah.
increase that by 50% again, it would be about 500.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that exact number, but it's
Yeah.
in that ballpark.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Dam?
I have a quick question.
Yes, Mr. Only.
Chuck, in the annual average sewage per year chart, there was a big dip back in the, I don't know, the 80s maybe. Yes, yeah, a big dip.
Yep. So that was in 18.
What happened there?
Again, don't quote me on this. Actually, no, that would have been before that. I was going to say, we did have a pretty substantial break on the Harbor Loop. And so that flow wasn't actually making it to the treatment plant, although I guess it would have been increased because it would have been tidal. I'm not 100% sure. Nate, do you have any thoughts on what happened in September, August of 18? I think it was
generally a dry period, being a 12-month rolling average. That really elongates the period. So it's not really an instantaneous. So I think it just generally relates to a drier period. And then certainly, going into a much wetter period.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see
You can kinda see
July of 18 here. So this is the actual average flow, not the running average. And you can see it, very low in the summer months of 18.
And then very high flows in like
No,
October,
December.
November, December of that year as well. Getting almost up to a million gallons. You can actually see it in the left-hand column.
And so that water is coming through the system from the weather, not from people using their toilets more or anything?
Correct. Yeah, it's mostly, these are curves that you see when you get, high rain events, high groundwater. And so that's, when your pipe that's, 6-7 feet below grade, it's submerged in high groundwater, any hole is just a constant stream of water into the pipe. And
Okay, that's why you're
can
trying to
fade
fix it.
directly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So and a lot of the pipe we have in town on the sewer side is similar to the water side. It's old. So there is a lot of, work that needs to be done to repair them. It's old vitrified clay pipe, which is pretty brittle. And it came in 3 to 6 foot sections. So you have a joint every 3 to 6 feet. So that's just, a lot of opportunities for, breaks to occur. So that's like when you see vitrified clay pipe, those are generally some of the worst for letting in groundwater.
And you replace them with plastic pipe.
You can do a combination of things. You can dig and replace, but like we were doing the Harbor Loop project, we use cured in place pipe lining,
So
which is a very,
So this
So that-
picture is like the before picture before we line the pipe, and then this is what it looks like after. So again,
Oh, wow.
it's a CIPP lining inside. They were actually doing it today on School Street. If anybody
Yep.
saw the big trucks, they basically blow a big liner into the pipe and cure it in place.
So like today alone, just in the 8 to 10 hour day they work today, they line from the Central School Street intersection, basically to where the R and the S is, where Chuck is highlighting right there. So they had that entire section in, an 8 hour day versus, if we dug and replaced that, that would take a couple weeks at least.
So the kind of pink and red, if that's what it looks like on your screen, these are all the areas that we're currently under contract to line the pipe or have already lined it. With the Green Mountain as the contractor that's out there now. So, it's several thousand feet of pipe. The Harbor Loop was the biggest place where, like I said, we had issues before. The reason we're going, you can see this is kind of cross country next to Sawmill Brook. So anytime that the brook is, overflowing or whatever, it's going to just go right into the collection system or, influence of high groundwater. And then going down School Street again, you have Sawmill Brook where it crosses here, but also by the time you get down to Church Street and Central Street, you're so close to the inner harbor, the groundwater is so high, any hole in that pipe is going to show itself in, pretty, standard fashion.
Yep.
So that's why we're aligning all of this, and we, are substantially complete, I would say, on doing that.
Right, thanks.
Chuck, I had a few questions.
Yep.
So there was some talk of sharing, this is part of Sue Brown's plan report of tying into the Beverly SESD system and possibly eliminating the plant. Is there any traction on that, or has that been?
Yeah. So we're still finalizing the report, and we have, made initial discussions with SESD and Beverly. So, the city of Beverly just has a collection system. They don't actually have a treatment plant that gets passed through to SESD, which is the Salem Essex Sewage District. And so, that's in Salem. So somehow all the flow at our treatment plant would have to make it all the way over to Beverly and then through Beverly system to SESD. So there's a few options for doing that. None of them are cheap. It will be a lot of money. And then there's also, the political ramifications, I'm sure you guys can appreciate, of, the city of Beverly saying, oh, now we're accepting, the Manchester flow, or even SESD, which, has their own unique utility, requires an act of the state legislator to allow another community to connect. So there's several hurdles. They'll be outlined in the report. We haven't finalized the report yet, but it's looking less and less likely that it would be able to go through Beverly, unless, of course, there's significant, monetary kind of payoffs that would be required for those. Now, another possibility that we are also looking into is, well, what about Gloucester? Gloucester also has a treatment plant. And none of these, whether we connect to Beverly or we connect to Gloucester or we, maintain our own plant for the foreseeable future, none of these things are going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. It's going to be a long, thought out, methodical process where, just to get to Beverly system is 7 miles of force main to get from our treatment plant to a reasonable place where we could connect to their system. So, you don't put in 7 miles of force main in a short time frame. It's just not going to happen. So it's similar story over on the Gloucester side. I will say Gloucester is much more, willing to think about these things in the long term, because they are looking at a, substantial upgrade to their treatment plant. Right now, they actually only have primary treatment. They don't have secondary treatment. They will probably find themselves in their own consent order with DEP to change their plant over to a secondary system, or they'll just agree to spend the $100 million for the upgrade. And then they are also, I've talked to Mike Hale, who's the DPW director in Gloucester, and they are looking, they're not 100% sewered on their system either. So, they would be picking up areas like Magnolia or some of their other further outreaches, which are, Magnolia is right next door to Raymond Street. So, there is some opportunity there. I told them certainly if they have anything imminent to, let me know and, keep us apprised of the situation. But again, they're not going to build secondary treatment overnight. That's going to be a several year process. So, these are the types of things that will be said very clearly in the report. We'll put some preliminary cost estimates, just thinking out loud, if we do 30,000 feet of pipe over to Beverly and it's $1,000 a foot, that's a $30 million project. So, that money's got to come from somewhere.
And we also need, so we're not completely removing, our footprint from the site. We would still be required to have a pump station somewhere on the existing wastewater treatment plant site to, start pumping it towards Beverly, since all of our collection system does funnel to this one location. To change that otherwise would be another, astronomical cost if possible.
Yeah, so nothing's impossible, but it all has a cost.
And then also on the report was, and I don't know if this is what you're looking at, is a potential plant within the LCD.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
I haven't
something?
Gotten into that one yet. So
Okay.
I know there have been people that have talked about it or at least mentioned it. I mean, it certainly would be something that would have to be looked at because as we have outlined in the CWMP, there's only so much capacity, and if you give it to a huge build out of the LCD or anything else, that means it's not going to be going to 500 dwelling units or residential. So that's certainly it's nothing to me if that's the plan that the town wants to put forth, then that's fine. So it could be used for with our current capacity, or it could be a smaller package station. Or on-site groundwater recharge. There's certainly ways to do it, but I have not gotten into the weeds on that by any means.
Okay, thanks. Okay, any other questions from board members?
Yeah, Ron, this is Mary. I have some questions.
Yes, Mary.
Hi, Chuck. Thanks for coming in. I
Yeah, no problem.
should have been here 2 years ago to do the overview. So did I hear you correctly that 1,200 houses are currently on sewer?
I think I said 1,000, but that was just a round number off the top of my head. I could look.
Okay, no, that's
I'd have-
fine. So
It does say in the existing conditions that it's 1,200 parcels.
Okay.
I don't know if that directly correlates to houses or dwelling units or exactly what that is behind that number.
Okay.
But yeah, give or take. That's generally.
So almost half of, if that's the case, almost half are not on sewer at this point in time.
Correct. Yeah,
Um,
definitely, probably.
And so I did read the CWMP, and I noticed they were making basic assumptions that we were in a level population, probably a slight decline in population. And you had mentioned the districts that they had studied, and then the LCD, they looked at it as if it was a commercial only build out. It was no residential. So question if there's a big difference between commercial and residential as far as sewer goes. Then as this relates to the 6.11, which you started out with, I'm wondering how many of the 200 allowed have been hooked in since the 1989 inception, and kind of how would you phase in the study areas? Do you phase in one district and collect the data and see how it goes? So how many hookups?
So I don't know by any means, the records at DPW when I got here were not, the greatest. I have no idea what happened in 1989 to, 2018. But I will say, there's definitely, when you're building out any of this, and it's probably mentioned in the CWMP explicitly, but there are guidelines for how you calculate flows and how you associate them with parcels and based on use and land use. And, I think it's called TR 16, if I'm not mistaken, is how they develop those numbers. I'd have to look. It's something like that either. Wait, is that what it is? Is it?
I don't know.
I think it's TR 16, but anyway, it's basically just a technical memorandum that, either DEP or EPA would have put out that is basically, this is how you shall, collect or, implement these programs and what flows you can expect associated with what type of unit. That's how we get the, right now, because of the moratorium, we have a, $1,650 bedroom fee. That bedroom, TR16, which if I'm right, that's what it is. But, they basically associate 110 gallons per day to a bedroom. That's part of the, the rate. So that's how we came to that, 110 times X equals 1,650 per bedroom, to capture basically the flow and to, pay for the subsequent improvements in the system. So, a similar exercise would be done for anywhere that you were going to be building out, where we would say this number of units or this number of bedrooms. Now, of course, that's just for, residential use, and the numbers break down the higher you get. So, a 5-bedroom house is not calculated the same way as a 15-bedroom house, and certainly not the same as a hotel or a office park or something like that. But there would be a different number associated with those. So it's all documented in some reg or another. As you can see, there's plenty of regs to go around.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to just take a look at that for planning purposes, because I'm wondering what the state has said with the CWMP having basic assumptions again of steady population, and there was the targeted study areas. If we're looking at potential infill development or multi-housing units at different places, so that wasn't part of this plan. How would you look at that as, okay, do we have I mean, at this point we couldn't because we're under the consent order, but how would you look at that for future development? How would you say that we could do that, we couldn't do that?
Well, I mean, typically, I did watch the presentation that, the fellow from the MAC, Symboli, I think Mr. Symboli put forward. And, it seemed like an interesting plan. We would, if any developer came to the town and said, I'm going to build out this or that, and this is true of the 40B project, and, we haven't received any hard numbers from them either, but, it's incumbent on them and their engineers and consultants to put forward that report that says, we want to do a 157 dwelling units, and it's going to, this is how much flow is going to be associated with that. And then we either have, Nate and I review it, or we have a peer reviewer review it and make sure they're citing the right tables and the right, technical memorandum. And, we agree or disagree. And then I think the other part of this that, I've seen in other towns, it's not in Manchester, but, where you have a developer that is looking to, put in whatever, whether it's a house or, 10 houses or, 156, units, there's what they call an II fee, where that developer would say, here's $1 million, go chase, this many gallons of II in your collection system so that it's a net zero to the, to the wastewater treatment plant. So that's something that I think we would need to look at, a lot closer once the consent order is lifted and we decide to, there is, like I said, still II in the system. It's a pipe dream to, pardon the pun, to ever think you're going to get to zero II. It's just not going to happen. So there's always some that you can chase, and we've been getting, everybody likes to call it the low-lying fruit. We've been getting that. We've been, the Harbor Loop was actually, some of the higher fruit, but there's still low-lying fruit that we need to get. And so, we're seeing a pretty big bang for our buck every time we do one of these projects. But it won't be like that forever, but there'll always be II that we're trying to get.
Okay, and then just one question on the water side. So you said the registered system amount, and we have that 100,000 GPD buffer, but we're at our registered system amount. So with water, the water being finite, and even when the 6.11 was written, it said our water supply is at or near capacity. How comfortable are you with our water side and added development?
Well, like I said, we're at 24% unaccounted for water. So that water is available if we can find it. And, we would like to be, accounting for it so that we can, also see the revenue from it. It does us no good to be, going into the ground somewhere. So, like I said, same with the II is true on the unaccounted for. You're never going to get to zero unaccounted for water. However, we should be able to do better than 24%. And I think we've seen that since we've implemented some of these projects where we've been, we know we have holes in our pipes and we're fixing them. So just the opposite direction. It's, we're keeping it in the pipe rather than, on the II side, keeping it out of the pipe. So, I think there's still some room to go there. 24%, that's 150,000 gallons a day. You're looking at 65 gallons per capita per day. That's a lot. That's a lot of people.
But
In general, I think we're if we find that unaccounted for, I think we can. And to keep it in perspective, unlike the sewer side, 100% of the town is connected to the water system, more or less, 99%.
Right.
So, the equivalent, 10% that we're looking for, is, all 5,000 residents. So that's another, 500 people.
But just dealing with the data that we have today, not hoping to find that 24%, but dealing with the data we have today, do we have any extra capacity with water?
Well, we have the 100,000 buffer. And so that's another thing I didn't get into, but I'll say it now is our registration is actually up with DEP this year. So in June, we will be submitting we want to extend our registration with DEP. There is talk of DEP issuing registrations with conditions, which will require mandatory outdoor watering bans during the summer. So if you consider, this is all subject to change, but if you consider our external, irrigation use, that's probably a considerable amount. So, I hope that doesn't happen because that's typically our higher water users that are, paying the higher block rate because Manchester has adopted a, increasing block rate for the more water you use, the more you pay. But this is another element where nothing is set in stone. It's all subject to change, and so
I think a good example to kind of elaborate, on where we're at, outdoor watering. February, for the month of February, we probably averaged about 200,000 gallons per day.
And in the summertime,
summer.
in the hotter months, we're over 1 million gallons per day.
Ron, I have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary. I see you have your hand up.
I'll try to be brief because this is going on for a while, but an observation. It seems to me like this is a really great example of why our town needs to have more revenue. It's really kind of unnerving to see us spend 100,000, 200,000 a year on something when we really would be a much better cost benefit to spend 3 or 4 million and get a larger chunk of it fixed. Is it true that the water treatment plant could continue for quite a while into the future as long as we are able to keep repairing things that need repairing?
Yes, like we said, there is no situation where we're abandoning the wastewater treatment plant in the near future. So we will need to continue to invest in it. And I echo what you said. I do think we need a bigger project. 3 or 4 million. That is in the capital plan in the next 4 to 5 years. So where we'll be doing a much larger upgrade at the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. Someone should mute themselves.
Excuse me, can you mute your phones?
Go back to the bylaw section 6.11. You say that you don't recommend removing it, but you do recommend limiting connections. Now, who would normally do that? Is that something the Board of Health would approve connections on, or what do you recommend for a control on that?
That's a good question. So, in practice today, we have allowed people to connect where they have already paid the betterment. So, over the course of time, since, people had paid the betterment, say on Rockwood Heights, and so, but they had never connected, they had kept their on-site system. So, we have allowed them to connect, because they paid the betterment, or, we had records, and that was through the Board of Health that we had those records. So, we have these building permits. I already have a service connection permit for water and for sewer. So in these situations, so it could be something that is handled that way. I think the difference that we're looking at is these extensions. So extending to go to, Eagle Head or Smiths Point or West Manchester, that's something where we would certainly need to, I don't know if the answer is town meeting or planning board, but, assuming that it's just to pick up the residential that already exists is different to me than, an LCD or, something that's, more finite.
So
So,
let me ask you to clarify. You said that right now, under the current order, we're not allowed to have extensions, which means adding neighborhoods.
correct.
But
Yeah.
I assume we are allowed to add dwelling units. We're allowed to add housing.
Yep. So that's what I'm saying. We have done that for like Rockwood Heights. I don't know that I don't think we've done it since I've been here for, a larger project.
So back to, I still don't understand the purpose of having a zoning bylaw that regulates the hookups. Can't just town regulations or
Yeah.
Isn't there other ways to just regulate? Certainly it should be
Yeah.
regulated, but does it have to be through a
Yeah.
zoning?
Yeah, I don't know. It certainly doesn't have to be. I don't know what the right answer is.
Okay,
of,
and then
what the
we'll try to wrap
mechanism
up. If it seems logical to add certain neighborhoods in town because it's pretty much flat from downtown to go west or to go south. But how do you assess whether to do that? Do you add up the houses and the amount of bedrooms and figure out your flow rate that you're going to be now having to handle? Or do you take a look at how many people there do you think, through talking to the Board of Health, has semi-failing or failing septic systems? I mean, how do you make a judgment?
I think we would only be able to evaluate the proposal that was in front of us. Like I said, nobody's been coming to, DPW office to say, hey, when are you extending out to West Manchester?
Well, has anybody assessed those neighborhoods so that you know what you're getting into and so that you could consider it?
Well, I believe it's, outlined in the CWMP.
Yes, and I
where
believe
where
the
they've looked
east.
into that. They've
Right.
even, associated, an average daily flow with some of those areas and, the potential cost. Now, of course, this is
Okay.
5 or 6
We don't
years
need to go
old
into
now.
it. So it is in
So,
the
yeah.
report, those
Yep.
approximate numbers. Okay, my last question would be if it's wiser environmentally, I know it's wiser to have neighborhood septic plants, which is maybe a cheaper way for the town to go. From what I understand, they're $4 or $5 million, depending on how big an area you're treating. Does it make sense? Does the town have a responsibility to contribute to a neighborhood septic if they're encouraging it to be built, or they just wash their hands of it and say, whoever's developing, they have to pay for their own?
In my opinion, it would be, the private property owners, because we're not looking to, or we don't have the resources at this point to, take over the, ongoing maintenance and, inspections, that's
Okay.
something that,
Okay.
they're required to do with the Board of Health, and, they have to submit those things to the Board of Health. If we were to go the other way and we were going to actively pursue them, it would be, we would need to address our, kind of manpower restraint, limitations.
Okay, you good, Gary?
Yeah, thanks.
Christina, you had your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Nate and Chuck. Thank you for this presentation. It was very helpful. A lot of my questions have been answered, but I did have one about in the wastewater treatment facility at the end. It talks about asset relocation. Am I reading this properly that in order to move this, you would need 30 acres to build a new wastewater treatment facility? Am I reading that correctly?
That sounds appropriate to me.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact passage.
Okay, no, that's
Yeah.
fine. And then that the wastewater treatment facility would be 15 million. But then you would still need a new pump station, or you would leave the current facility as the pump station? Am I reading that right also?
Yeah, so, I would take the numbers presented as a grain of salt. I don't know that you're
Okay.
getting to 15 million for a brand new treatment plant facility, but be that as it may, yeah, you would, like Nate was saying, the low point of the system as developed now is the wastewater plant. And so to relocate it anywhere, it will be higher, which means that you need to collect the wastewater at that low point and pump it to the new point. So you would be in for, and that's part of our evaluation that we're doing, just saying that we're gonna pump to Beverly or pump to Gloucester. They'll take care of the treatment end, but we have to get it there. And so that
Okay.
requires a pump station. So yeah, it would be.
So
an
high
additional
level,
cost.
how long do you think this would last before it was crucial?
The existing treatment plant?
Correct.
I mean, it'll last forever if we take care of it and maintain it. I mean,
Okay, perfect.
But we will need to fortify it, because every projection I've seen says it's going to be underwater.
Okay.
So there will be a seawall that needs to be invested in. There will be flood proofing that needs to be invested in. There will be other equipment that needs to be invested in. And so
But those are in
essentially
the-
over time you would have a new.
Right.
new
Okay.
treatment
But those
plant
numbers are
facility.
just a few $1,000,000 compared to
Well,
20 million.
it'll be more than a few million. I mean, just the seawall alone would be a few million.
No, that's what I'm saying. All right. Okay. I got it. Thank you. So the other thing in that 1989, bylaw, it said that our water, we were at capacity. So could you just touch on that? And I also heard that Hamilton is looking to tap into our water. And is our recharge rate okay? Like, can you just talk about water a little bit more?
Sure. So our registration actually has been exactly the same since 1985 when it was
Okay.
implemented. So, we have not, in the 30 plus years that we've had a registration with DEP, we have not gone over it.
Okay.
So, and that was from whatever the population was in 1985 to today. Now, a lot of that is associated with, low flow fixtures and so on and so forth, conservation efforts, all these things can come into play. But, for all intents and purposes, as I've tried to say, is, we have kind of a 100,000 gallon per day buffer that we haven't really tapped. And we have the ability, with more hard work and, planning to, reduce our current usage even more. Now, I have no idea if there's so many things involved with allowing Hamilton to connect to our
Okay.
system. So first of all, DEP would have to approve that. I don't think there's any chance that they would, but even if they would look at the, existing, capacity and how much we were planning on giving or, selling to Hamilton. I think that was the intent when they actually built the plant. Like there is a filter unit area that is unbuilt. And my understanding is that was built for, or that the space was allowed there for Hamilton to, basically pay for that upgrade at some point in the future. But I just don't see it being realistic at this point. But I could be wrong.
All right. So then we have this 100,000, buffer per day. In your opinion, what amount would be safe to tap into and use, on a permanent going forward basis and still make sure that we had a decent buffer?
Well, I don't want to use any of the buffer. I want to
Okay.
continue
That's
making
perfect.
making improvements in the system, and we will see those over, we will see the improvements over time, and we'll be under that. That buffer is just there, just for that.
Buffer.
Similar to the 80% that we have on the wastewater side. When you get to 80%, they want to make sure you have a plan to get down below 80% or not go over 100. So I would say we're at, our registered volume amount. We have some more there, and it's going to fluctuate over time, but as long as we have a plan going forward to stay at our level or less, which I think we have a very, realistic shot of going down, 10 to 20% on that. I think we're in good shape, and I think DEP will realize that. I will say, like I said, they are looking very hard at putting in these restrictions, regardless of whether or not we're at 100% or, we're using our 100,000 gallon per day buffer. DEP may say you're not allowed to use outdoor watering, in which case we'll see our revenue and our usage go down dramatically. And that will be an issue that we need to address. So it's almost conserving to the point of, hurting. But
And that's coming forward in June?
so we have to reapply for our registration in June. We won't get the approval. I mean, they will approve our registration. It's just a matter of if they condition it, and that will happen in December. And that's
Okay,
not a
thank-
Manchester thing. That's a statewide thing. All
Okay.
registrations are up, and all of them could potentially be conditioned.
So
Okay.
do we have like do we have do we have data on how Gravelly Pond recharges?
We have had studies done in the past. They were inconclusive without doing a intensive hydrogeologic survey, and the town did not take that on at the time.
Okay.
But they have looked into it, but it's certainly a groundwater recharge more than a watershed overland recharge.
Okay. That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
All right, Chuck and Nate, yes, thanks for sharing all that information. By the way, it is TR 16 with the
Thank you.
flows. You are correct.
Yeah, pretty good for a water guy.
No, we appreciate everything and all that information, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, anytime. Offer stands anytime anybody wants a tour of the wastewater treatment or even the water treatment plant.
We might take that on this summer, COVID dependent. Okay, thank you. All right. Next item is the Housing Choice Initiative, again by Christina. The desire was to have someone from KP Law and or Alan Wilson come and speak to us on the recent law change. Unfortunately, John isn't able to make our meeting tonight, but Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wilson has also agreed to both speak at our next meeting on this subject.
Yeah, so Mr. Whitten said that he would be available if you wanted him to present next at your next meeting. And Mr. Wilson also said he would be glad to join that conversation. Yeah. And we've also put information up on the website. There's a couple, KP Law did an overview, and there's an overview from the Citizens Housing group as well.
I've read through them, and I think it would be a good idea to have one or both speak. I think there could be some questions from that. I think it'd be a good idea that the board would be able to pose some questions and just get an overview. So I would like to move that to the next meeting. And have
Sounds
that
good,
done.
Ron. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next, have a discussion on follow-up questions for Mr. Simboli regarding his development plans at the LCD. Last meeting, we received a presentation by the MAC, Mr. Simboli, and he asked the town for guidance. Well, I don't think the planning board is ready to respond until we ask some more questions. So I'll turn this part of the meeting over to Gary Gilbert, who has some comments on this.
Thanks, Ron. When Mr. Simboli came, he's the owner of the MAC, just for the record, and he has, I think, about 46 acres of land that he owns. And he was asking us for guidance. And I think it's worth stating that both the Board of Selectmen and this planning board and the previous planning board voted to adopt a master plan, which is a document stating that we as a town have the goal to encourage the development of commercial uses up in the LCD, as well as varied types of housing in town, undefined areas, and the creation of playing fields. So this board has not made any recommendations to the town yet, and the town has not agreed with Mr. Simboli on any sort of master plan, nor on using the state's 40R housing program, nor on any specific land uses in the LCD. So we have a lot, I think, to discuss and think about over time. I think it's probably clear that what was proposed was a very large scale preliminary and conceptual master plan only. his plan was in response to what we had in the master plan. And I know he presented to the planning board a similar plan almost 2 years ago to the planning board. I was there. I don't know if anybody else here, I know Ron was there. I think we all agree on the sincerity behind some of the land uses he's proposing. They're important to him as a person, and they could be good for our community. So I don't believe the planning board can respond to him until we get more information and better understand where his size projections for his land uses came from. We don't know if our region needs a 40 unit or a 240 unit assisted living community, or if a 40 room or 100 room hotel could even survive in that location. So we would benefit to see him do some professional needs or marketing assessments to establish the need for some of his land uses and to clarify for us so we can understand the size of them also. So that's why tonight I'm suggesting that I started a draft list of questions that Ron could send to Mr. Simboli, knowing that we can add more questions to it later. They don't have to be a perfect list of questions, but I think it will start this process going forward. We could request that he try to respond within 2 meetings from now, so in 4 weeks from now. And right tonight, this doesn't need to be a long discussion, I don't believe. We just should talk about some questions. And finally, the next step, I think the board needs to discuss maybe at the next meeting and come to some consensus on what kind of land uses should be there. I'm certain Mr. Simboli wants to see some consensus and direction from the town as to what land uses we feel are important to have there. Perhaps we could make an A list and a B list of possible land uses. For example, it's my opinion that it would not be a good idea to see some office space developed adjacent to the MAC facility, and then in the corner hidden away some assisted living units. That would isolate the assisted living and would not make for a cohesive neighborhood. If assisted living is developed there, it makes sense to have some sort of sympathetic housing units developed, such as transitional housing or something else. None of this needs to rise to the level that the 40R state requirements have, but that's for us to decide or recommend. So I suggest we put this on our agenda for the next meeting and then and not go into it tonight. I can send a list to the planning board between meetings, which compiles what land uses the master plan recommended, what Mr. Simboli recommended, and what he can do as of right, because it's important to keep in mind what he can do right now, as long as he can deal with his own septic, what he can do as of right. So as far as the questions for Simboli, I guess I'd open it up to you, Rhonda, or to the board to.
Yeah, I'd like to get any feedback on the board on allowing me to send these questions out and get the ball rolling on this. These, again, don't have to be a final set of questions, but just a beginning. Maybe some board members would like to add some additional questions. I mean, I don't want to bog them down with pages of stuff, but at least get some kind of idea of to help us decide on proceeding on land use in the area. So I'll take any comments from the board on this, on moving forward. Any thoughts?
I thought we did have it, Ron. I thought we did have a general list of, during the recodification process, we came up with some potential uses that we were interested in.
I'm suggesting we talk about uses at the next meeting, but tonight he presented a lot of uses and numbers. We don't know, he didn't explain to us where it got those numbers from. So I think my suggestion is we focus on trying to clarify that, not the uses.
Ron, this is Mary. I have a comment.
Yes, Mary.
I guess I'm a little confused because it seems like these types of questions are getting down into the weeds in something that we don't even know if we are going in the 40R direction, if we're going into no development direction, if we're going into just changing the zoning bylaws. I'm not really sure why we're going down this path at this point in time. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying we don't kind of have the broad picture yet.
Okay. Any thoughts or comments from anyone else?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on this. I think we do have a pretty good general idea of certainly what Mr. Simboli was talking about. And I think right off the bat, some of his numbers seemed to a lot of people to be too big. And I think maybe we should be asking him these questions right up front. I don't think it hurts to ask questions. I don't think it's making policy or anything. I think we're just trying to see where he's going and why he's going there. But I do think we all have in mind certain uses, even if we need to discuss them certainly, but I don't think it hurts to ask Simboli and give him plenty of time to give us answers to these questions that Gary's put together.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any other comments? Gary, Lauren, Christine?
I guess I misunderstood. I thought we were asking about uses. I'm not sure what the numbers part was.
All right. Well,
Well,
a lot of the land uses are not surprises. They're things that we put in our master plan. And he was primarily reflecting off of what we had written in the master plan. But I think we need to understand whether the area really needs how big of an assisted living facility is needed in the area, and how big of a hotel. Would a hotel really even survive there? It might, but I think it would be very helpful if he did some, you have to spend some money, and to some extent on our behalf, but it would all serve to our edification as we consider uses and continue the conversation.
yes,
Ron,
Mr. Russell. Yes, Mr. Russell.
I just simply want to say that I support having a dialogue with Mr. Simboli. He's the only landowner developer that we've seen really proactively looking at doing something, and I think it behooves us to have a conversation. And I also think that these types of questions that we go through with Mr. Simboli probably will be very informative for the rest of the work that we're trying to do. And I realize that it gets confusing because we've got 40B, 40R, LCD without 40R, change all of them. We have, endless sort of permeations of the same conversation. But I think that talking with Mr. Simboli, especially since he asked for guidance and he wants to do something, we should have this exercise.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Can I ask Gary, do you have any points that you'd like to ask him? Nobody's really suggested an additional question.
I probably will add to your list, or perhaps clarify your list. I've read it. I think it's a good start. I think there probably are a couple of questions that we, as from the planning board, should just make sure that Mr. Simboli understands what the community might be hearing when he presents something. So we saw for instance, some reaction to the size of his proposal. And what we need to be clear with him is that you need to clarify what you need, because what we heard and saw is that, whoa, it's way too big. So sort of the big messages that we're getting from the community, I want to make sure that he understands if he's hearing the same thing we are. I think the sewerage, and it was very helpful to have this presentation from Chuck Dam tonight, and Nathan. For instance, when Mr. Simboli said that he would need to connect to town sewer, you could almost hear the collective cry throughout the town of, oh, heck no, we're not paying for that. But so we should have this conversation, because there have to be some cost calculations that could be done fairly quickly to give everyone an idea of what the commitment from the town would be versus what Mr. Simboli would have to pay. So I'd like to have that discussion with him, kind of what are the known deal killers. We know what the deal killers probably are, so we could get to that pretty quickly as well. I think that's all I have to say.
One thing I was trying to get at here is if he could explain to us what these numbers are, and maybe he needs to learn himself what the numbers should be, But if we start to hear, well, the hotel should maybe be only 60 rooms, and maybe the housing, the assisted living maybe should be 80 bedrooms. If we start to see numbers, then we could start to do some flow rate calculations. And then we could start to make actual recommendations or judgments like, oh, totally out of the question to connect to town sewer, or perhaps it's something worth considering, but we can't even get there unless the quantities, the square footage of the commercial space and the number of living units are quantified. It would also inform us as we judge what land uses we want to see there. They all sort of work sympathetically, and I think it's going to probably be a cyclical process, but we should start on all of it.
I don't see any reason the board can't be proactive and get data. I mean, the board has complained that it doesn't get data. Here's a chance for us to be proactive and get some data ahead of time. We're not endorsing anything, but I think asking some questions and getting data and being proactive is in our favor. So
do people feel that we should just take this list of questions as they are and have Ron send it off to him and just ask him, or is there more to add to it? Or I mean, there will be more to add.
If the board want to opine and put some more questions on, I can post this at our site, and you can add some more questions to the question log, and then I'd like to send it off by the end of the week. Is that something doable or desirable? Or I could send it off as is.
I wish Chuck was still here. Does anyone know the water status over there?
Everybody's on well water. The medical facility had to spend a lot of money to get a well and so forth.
I'm still here.
Yep, we're still.
Oh,
No, I think he's on town. I think the Mac is on
there.
town water.
Sorry, you're right.
Okay.
I forgot that.
It's on town water.
But also he's allowed to do some land uses as things stand. He can expand in certain ways.
Ron, this is Chuck. If you don't mind, I can say
go
a
ahead,
couple of
Chuck.
things. So they do have a 6-inch line going from Mill Street over to the MAC, which only the MAC is on that service at this time. I do think that if there's a much bigger development in the pipeline, so to speak, we really need to loop the system in one form or another, and the fire flow is what's going to be dictating the requirements up there. So if they put in a big hotel or assisted living or any of the other number of things that he had mentioned, the fire flow requirements are what's going to drive how much water needs to get to that site. And it's going to be more than a 6-inch main going underneath 128.
If he wants to expand, Chuck, do we have the right? I assume we have the right to say no if he wants to do.
I don't think he'll be able to expand and meet fire flow requirements. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
That's going to be what dictates how he can expand. There's just no way you can get that much water through a 6-inch pipe. And we will have to dictate that.
Can he pull out of a well? Is it possible that he could do both?
Sure. Yeah.
That sounds
it
like
the
another
same-
question. Oh, go ahead, Christina.
Is it the same well we're pulling from?
No, this would be a private well that he would have.
Well, I meant aquifer. I'm sorry. This is part of this whole hydrological study that we really haven't done, right?
Well, it depends on what he needs to get. I'd have to see, again, this is where we would ask the developer to give us what they think they need and what they're going to be, if I will say the DEP will kick in if it's more than, I think, 10,000 gallons per day, then they have to get a permit with DEP, just like they do on the wastewater side. So, there's lots of shoes to drop before you get there. And, we would have a chance to comment and kind of dictate some of those terms.
So
But
if we did encourage development and we did upgrade the pipe, we would be going over our buffer zone at the rates that we're using water today. Is that correct?
It would depend on the size.
No, we would need to know the size. We would need to
Right.
know what they're looking at. And, again, there's similar, documents, that are, generally accepted engineering practice that would, dictate what, what the amount of water would be required for, a 100-bed hotel or 100, assisted living facility or whatever. I'm getting at what's going to dictate it, though. I'm telling you, is the fire flow requirement. So, if they need to get 3,000 gallons a minute to fight a fire at this new facility, you're not getting 3,000 gallons a minute out of 6-inch pipe at a dead end. You're going to have to loop it with an 8-inch, and it's going to be, significant dollars to make that connection. Or he's going to have to put in some sort of high-tech fire suppression system and all these things. So, again, anything can be engineered, but it's not as easy as just saying that, we're going to let them connect or not connect. The devil's in the details.
So this is a question to add to Gary's list, which is, have you considered fire flow requirements in your plan?
Yeah, good point.
So I guess I'm confused. I thought you said we were pretty much at our limit for water with the current I&I.
No, so the
We have a
I&I is on the
buffer and we
wastewater
shouldn't
side.
tap into it.
I&I is wastewater.
Yeah,
No, no, no.
the I&I is on the wastewater side.
24%. No, the 24%.
Yeah, that's the unaccounted for water.
Correct. Okay.
UAW.
So we're there. So if we reduce that, we have a little bit extra, but right now we're pretty much at our.
Yep. So
How
yeah,
many?
we'd have to see what his flows are. I mean, I think
Okay.
there's
I just wanted
there's
to
the
make sure I
ability to
heard you
see-
correctly, that we're pretty
Yep.
much at capacity for water right now.
we are
As
at
of
our
today.
registered volume. And
Okay, thank
there
you.
would be
Okay.
work that would need to be done.
So we have 100,000 gallons of buffer, which would allow theoretically 1,000 units of housing.
But Chuck said he doesn't want to go into that water at all.
I understand, but
Well,
technically,
Yeah,
that's how big the capacity is.
we would need more of a plan going forward. He's not going to connect tomorrow, just like, we're not going to allow him connect tomorrow. But, if
Right.
it's 3 years down the road, where are we at in 3 years? So I think we can project some things, but I don't know if it's, to get to this system that he's showing, for build out, but that's
Chuck,
part of the process.
do we have the right to say no? I mean, never mind the fire flow for fire prevention, but do we have the right to say, no, you can't use more water there?
I think so.
Isn't that why we have the moratorium?
Well, there's no moratorium on the water side. The water is 100%
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
of town. So it's just a matter of there's no connection there. So, the no, we will not allow you to connect to our system is that's certainly within the town's right. Because he's asking for a lot more. Or not. I mean, he might pare back his thing. He might say, I'm going to put in wells for all these X, Y, and Z. There's lots of details that he could work out to make it more likely or not.
I think, again, this reinforces that we need to have an idea of the quantity and sizes of the types of uses that the people are considering and the need for them. And then we can look at that reflects on flow rates. And we can make a better recommendation.
It doesn't sound like anything is going to work there. I don't know, but we'll see.
Ron, could I pose a question?
Yes, Sue.
Yeah, if you would, I'd like to ask Chuck if he could describe a little bit about registration for water. It sounds like it's based on a population in a town, which is why ours has been pretty flat. But a registration isn't so much about the capacity of water that exists, because an aquifer doesn't exist under just one land or a water source. Is that right? Could our registration increase?
So the short answer is no. The registration was, back in the 80s, the state told all the different water systems that they need to register their volumes with the state. And they had to base that on something. So it was basically their historical flows from 1980 to 85 or something like that. And so they, the towns at that point was 0.72 million gallons per day on average for the course of the year. That has been grandfathered in over the course of time to, every time they renew these registrations to date, which I think are usually on a 10-year renewal. Now, if you go over your registration or over the 100,000 buffer, what they'll require you to do is, instead of a registration, you'll have to put in for a Water Management Act permit. We currently do not have a permit, we have a registration. The permit is you saying, I need to go over my registration, so I want to permit this amount. And that puts us into a whole nother, amount of effort with DEP to get them to give us an approved permit. So that's the process in a nutshell. So that's why, you know, it behooves us to make sure we stay, you know, at our permitted level, at our registered level within the buffer. I'm not so concerned that we're going to go over the 100,000 gallons in 1 year without me seeing it coming. And I, you know, as long as we're committed to making improvements system wide, I think we'll start to see those UAW, unaccounted for water, come down over time, and that will allow additional connections to be made. Now, if, you know, a hotel that has a, you know, whatever capacity and, you know, is going to show us 100,000 gallons per day, like that's certainly a non-starter. But there, you know, there's that possibility, I guess, until we see the, you know, the permanent or the, you know, the actual plan. So, you know, it's something that I would certainly comment on if the plan came across my desk.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. But there is a process if the town wanted to go above that, if it deemed it was in its best interest to allow more development there and wanted to go above that, there is a process for doing it. It's just we don't have all the pieces that we need right now for that, to go through that process. And wouldn't be one you'd be looking forward to.
No, and the, you know, the permit requirements, if we went to a Water Management Act permit, would be, you know, no outdoor watering. You know, there would be all these sort of conservation measures in place. That might even be a condition. I don't know this for a fact, but it's likely that that would be a condition of getting a permit is, have you implemented these outdoor water use restrictions? Have you implemented these other conservation measures? Are you below the thresholds for unaccounted for water? Are you below the thresholds for residential per capita per day? So there's lots of like different criteria that they're going to be looking for us to meet as a town to give us the ability to get that permit.
Got you. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Doc, I've got a piggyback question on that. You said our target, you'd like to see us targeting maybe 15% of loss of potable water instead of 24%. How many years and how many dollars would it take us to get there? Is it realistic?
Well, actually, we need to get to 10%, actually, not 15, but, you know, I got to get to 15 before I can get to 10. I think, you know, as I showed in that map, the system itself is over 120 years old. So, you know, we've been doing $1 million a year. It's roughly 5,000 to 6,000 feet of pipe. You know, we have 40 miles of pipe. So that's, you know, 40 times 5,280. So, you know, it's a big system. It has a lot of holes, but it's not crazy. I mean, it's doable, but it's, you know, it's not going to happen in 1 year. Will it happen in 5? Maybe. But it remains to be seen. You know, we're not doing a lot of high tech, you know, studies on where these leaks are and where we're having issues. We're looking at historical break data. We're looking at bad soils. We're looking at low-lying areas that are in the ocean, you know, things like that are pretty, I don't need to be a rocket scientist. I just need to be an engineer to know that we have issues there.
You just said 5 years. That's kind of encouraging. That sounds achievable.
Yeah, I think, you know, we got to keep going, and, you know, I think we'll see, you know, I can't promise it. Yeah, we gotta keep doing these projects. I gotta, you know, I have other areas where I think we may have issues that I can solve. You know, there's lots of different pieces of that 24%. You know,
and Chuck, how many gallons is the town consuming per day now?
On average, about 0.72 million gallons a day, so 720,000 gallons on average. You know, in the summer we're well over 1 million. In the, you know, dead of winter we're well under 500,000.
Okay.
Can I just ask a logistic question? Can you get that fire flow through a well, or is that more engineering suppression with the building supply?
It's not either or. You could do,
Okay,
you could do
both, a little bit of both.
or-
Okay.
Yeah.
So he could do something like this without the water. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just to close the loop, I think I'll post a file in our next meetings folder with the questions, and members can add to it. And towards the end of the week, I'll close it up and send it on if any objections. All right, thanks. Thanks, Chuck, again, and Nate. The next item would be comments on the revised curb opening preamble that Chris only wrote. We received comments from Mary, and Mary mostly changed the word should to must. Do I have that right, Mary? Is that kind of what the changes were?
Yes, I think I said in the second paragraph that Manchester, it says Manchester has the unusual requirement. I don't think it's unusual, but it's, people can
Okay.
choose the words. I don't care. But then with the requirements, yeah, I mean, should means like, geez, if you can, that'd be great. If you can't, that's great too. I think we either have to be, this is what we need, or this, we're just being, I don't want to be vague.
Right, so I don't object to those changes. Anyone else have any objections to the changes? Chris, yourself?
Yeah, Ron, Gary,
No,
Russell.
I don't object. Oh, but I would like to add one other thing that I'm not sure is in the final one, which is something about respecting trees that may be affected by.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that wasn't that, okay. I thought that was added, but yes.
It may have been added. I just want to make sure that it's in.
Yeah, no, I thought we discussed that at our meeting, but okay. And Gary, you had a comment, Gary Russell?
Yeah, I would just say that I'm not going to make it an objection, but in terms of writing regulations, should versus shall or must is a pretty clear demarcation. And I think in this case, should is appropriate. Should means best practices. Is it achievable? And it allows flexibility for minor deviations or unexpected circumstances. Where in terms of regulation, shall or must means that if you cannot meet this exactly on the nose, then you have to kick yourself to another process. And for many of these things, I don't think it warrants shall or must. Should is best practices.
Okay, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Any
Ron,
other comment?
I
yeah,
agree
my
with
comments back to that, and again, I mean, this is just for the cricket, it's not the actual bylaw, so I don't have a strong stance, but I thought the backfall was that then it had to go to a special permit process. So if somebody can't do these items, then they do have to go for a special permit.
It's the allowance of minor deviations, say when like your neighbors went to measure the driveway and it was a foot off after it was constructed. Maybe it's 6 inches off, or maybe there is a tree in the way that forces a 2-foot move of the location. These are minor deviations that don't impact the viability of the proposal.
Yeah, I understand. It seems reasonable. Any other comments?
Ron,
Yes.
agree
Yeah,
with Mr. Russell.
Okay. Mary, would that be acceptable? We go back to should.
That's fine, yeah, this isn't the bylaw.
Right,
This is just an
right.
article.
Okay, we'll Chris, go ahead and send with the should as written,
Okay.
and add your tree protections.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. Running a little late. Thank you, Chris. Next, Sue, the notification of the 91 application, Central Street Bridge culvert replacement. Sue, can you explain the reason we're getting this?
Sure. Chapter 91 applications, regardless of whether they're permitted by the planning board or any other authority, it has a form in the in the application that says that the planning board has been notified of it. So this is, this application is for the changes to the bridge, the Central Street Bridge. And it's still a ways off, and Chuck could probably speak to that project as well, but it's just a sign off that we're aware of it. And there's no further action that the board needs to take.
Any questions from the board on this? Chuck, how far along are we from this anyway? I'm just curious.
Well, Nate, you go. You're good.
Yeah, you've been talking a lot. So really right now it's funding based. Whenever we can get the funding, and we're pursuing a few grants to fund the project, we are about a year out in having, approved permits, Chapter 91 included. In an ideal scenario, if we had permits in hand by the end of this fall, and the grant awards come back, late fall, early winter, we would like to have the project on the street basically this time next year, followed by, signing construction contracts and then construction starting in earnest, the fall of 2022.
2022, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board on this project? Okay, thank you again, Nate and Chuck. Might as well stay on for the whole meeting. Who knows what's next? So, okay, so on the minutes, I'd like to just approve them blanketly, all three. I don't think, Helene, correct me if I'm wrong, that we received many comments, except, Gary's, which was kind of a lot of crossouts, which I think I'd like to just ignore and go with your original set of minutes, Helene.
Yeah, I don't, unless someone put them in very late on in the process, I didn't see much. I didn't see anything, just Gary's, which was.
So
I just have some grammatical ones, but it's not important.
okay, if we can make a motion to approve with just some grammatical, I'd like to approve all three tonight as one blanket motion, and just allow for Mary to make some grammatical changes.
I'll make that motion. I'll move that all three get approved with grammatical corrections proposed by Mary.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Second.
I'll take a roll call on that. Mr. Coons,
Yes.
Ms. Delicio,
Yes.
Ms. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Sure.
Mr. Only,
Yes.
Mr. Russell,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, thank you. Liaison reports, the CPC met last week. The master plan subcommittee plan was submitted and approved by the CPC regular board, and it's now being printed. At some point, it'll be posted, the electronic copy will be posted on their website. Also, the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen approved the CPC warrant for town meeting. So that's what I have on the CPC. Any other liaison or subcommittee reports from the board?
I can report on the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Authority met jointly on the 24th of February and accepted the report on the recommendations for the public housing sites in Manchester. We've just finalized a summary of the report that I'll make sure everybody in the planning board gets. So I guess, Sue, you can post it on the shared point. And I welcome everyone to read it and ask any questions, make any comments. That's what it's for. We tried to make it as understandable as possible.
Ron, can I ask Chris a question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Chris, should we just send you comments? What's the process?
That's a good question. I guess I would the proper thing to do. I guess I would address questions and comments to John Feuerbach and maybe to Gretchen Wood.
Okay,
John is the chairman of the trust and Gretchen is the chairman of the Housing Authority. I think that's probably the proper way to do it.
Chris,
I
is
thought you were
there,
gonna
if,
give us a
if-
presentation, Chris.
Pardon?
I thought you were gonna recap for us.
Oh, you want me to recap?
That's what you said a couple meetings ago. You were gonna like,
Like this report really, it's like a 8-page thing, which
Okay.
lays it all out with everything you need to know, I think. I mean, I
Okay.
could do it. It would just take a bunch of time and
got it. Okay.
we could spend time better doing other things.
Chris, could I suggest that if these are meant to go to, if they're, the comments that you want to make, Mary, are meant to go to the consultant, that you copy me on it. If they're just about the writing of the summary, that's fine, just to go to John.
and Ron, I have a FinCom update.
Yes, FinCon update. Thank you.
So FinCom met, they talked about the regionalized dispatch center, the ramifications of a dark station at night. They did some cost and looked at some cost analysis, what would save the town, what would not save the town. Brief discussion about the 40B, 40R, added population. They reviewed the potential added expenses pertaining to schools, police, and fire. They talked about tax rate, and we, as a town, are currently sitting on a lot of cash in reserves. I think it's about $6 million. There was a brief compost site update, and this project is being scaled back, and I think a new scope of work will be posted soon.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other reports? Okay, the town planner report and the including the local rapid recovery planning initiative. Sue, I put it up on screen, and did you want to just hit the highlights?
Sure, I'll skip over the first one because Chris has already done that. I'll skip over the second one because you already know about that. But I will just, for people who are on the telephone or on the site, other than the planning board members, I want everyone to know that there's been an option summary developed by our consultant that lays out the various options we have. So the option for a 40R, the option for an overlay district that's not a 40R or that's not connected with the state, changing of the underlying zoning, et cetera. So those are hopefully that we can discuss those at the next planning board meeting under the 40R discussion. Let's see, the open space and recreation plan, there's not much new going on there. I think that committee was meeting tonight, so I should know more after tonight. The Western Woods Preservation Initiative, I am still waiting for the consultant to start his work, or actually to get the contract in order. There's been some difficulties, some health issues that are slowing that down. And if it doesn't come online soon, then we're going to have to give our money back and do it again, try it again another year. But that's just kind of run into a hiccup. The wastewater treatment facility, check is still on, but he provided most of that data already. So it looks like I'm in pretty good shape. The housing production plan has been approved by the state. We're just awaiting that formal letter in the mail. So let's talk about the local initiative project. No, the LIP. Everyone knows what's going on there. The next Board of Selectmen workshop is in 2 weeks. The local rapid recovery grant. This is a planning initiative that is focused on finding ways to assist the downtown businesses in recovering from the effects of the pandemic and to make the businesses more resilient going forward for whatever else they might face. There is going to be a project webinar. I have the 9th. Yeah, so that's tomorrow. So tomorrow for the people in charge of the program. But and one thing I want to talk about is we've identified a number of boards and committees who might want to take part in that. The Downtown Improvement Committee is certainly interested in that. The Bike and Ped, given their interest in the downtown. I'm happy to have a member of the planning board if anyone thinks that they might be interested in, particularly in downtown businesses and thinking about how to make them more resilient in the future. So it is intended probably to be a fairly short project within 4 months, maybe, I would guess. And it would be just a lot of outreach to the downtown businesses.
I would like a link, Sue, please.
Do we
This
have a
is Christine.
volunteer?
Yeah, I do. I would like a link, please. I kind
Okay.
of follow Bike and Ped, so if they're going, I should probably go.
Okay, Christine will be our volunteer. Thank you.
Is there, yep.
Any other questions for Sue on her report?
I actually emailed Mary Riley, and I'm on the Park and Rec Committee, and I never received an email about anything starting back up again. I know there was some illnesses there, but
Yeah, so the group that's meeting tonight is not the open space group that
Oh,
you're a part of. It's the
Yeah.
open space
Got it. Yeah,
implementation
sorry.
group. Yeah, and he is still the consultant is still having some hardships, and I think she's hoping to get some answers on how they can best move forward. Hopefully, she'll find out tonight. I think he might have been able to try to touch base with them tonight.
All right, thank you,
Uh,
Sue.
Ron, this is Mary. I don't have a
Yeah.
question for Sue, but I'd like to see, I don't know if I need to make a motion or what the process is, but I think the town planner report, it would be good to have this posted out on the website so residents can see.
Um,
Is that a planning board decision or is that,
I don't think it's a planning board. I mean, I don't think we control Sue, but.
Sure you do, Ron. I don't mind posting it. We can just put a placeholder or a link on the planning board site that just says planning board reports, and I can post them there monthly. I don't mind.
that'd be great
Alright.
if you could do it. If the other planning board members don't agree, that's fine. I just wanted to throw it out there.
Sue's willing to do it. I don't think we have any objections.
Nothing wrong with
Okay,
it.
I just have a general question. I've been reading about the housing choice. Does our general district, and maybe you can research it or whatnot, does our general district, Sue, qualify as the zoning requirement for the MBTA community?
Our
Yes.
zoning, our general district, it would be a portion of the general district, but the general district does not allow multifamily by right. So as written, it doesn't meet the objectives or the requirement as a multifamily district that's required.
So four units are allowed as of right in the general.
I thought that exactly.
I thought it was too, but I think
Yeah.
that's a better question for Witten, maybe.
But they're-
Uh,
Straightforward, it's in the bylaws, but I think they have to be within the structure of the building, but still they are allowed as of right.
I thought they were too.
Oh, well, that's a good question. Let me, I'm happy to check.
Okay, thank you. Here's some bad news or good news, depending on what side you're on, but Mark Bobrowski can't make our March meeting. So we're going to go through the process again to find a date in April for our next public workshop with recodification. So
And Ron, Ron, he offered 2 dates, the 14th and the 21st, that he is available.
Okay, so looking at that, that is a Wednesday and a Wednesday.
So the 21st is spring break.
So you're thinking the 14th? I mean, do people want to decide this now, or do you want to look at your calendars?
I can't make the 21st.
How does the 14th sit with everyone currently?
I'm okay.
That's fine with me.
Okay with me too.
All right, Sue, let's throw out the 14th as a possible date.
Okay.
Sounds like there's enough. Thank you all. Just a couple of housekeeping items. I think we got a late email from Helene on conflict of interest ethics acknowledgement form from town clerk. Just wanted to remind everyone to get that back to town clerk. I think you just need to sign it. I did it electronically and emailed it to her, and she seemed to be fine with that. So I didn't do any, I didn't go in person or mail anything. So it seems like that would be acceptable. So for our next agenda, Mary, in regards to yours, I'd like to have this 40R Smart Growth Overlay District Draft Regulations and the Design Standards discussion, and also the, as Gary mentioned, I think it'd be good to have the 40R land uses discussion and consensus. So I think that would be enough to fill up our 2 hours.
So Ron, my request from a couple weeks ago was to have the LCD options. So obviously we're looking at a 40R, but what we can present to residents also is the other options, whether we just change or modify our current bylaw, or we do a different type overlay district. We need to review those different options.
Okay, and I think maybe Gary Russell could take the lead on describing our options on that topic.
Yeah, that's fine. I can do that. I think that it can be part of the 40R discussion. If it's, which is, I mean, I think we've been talking about it anyway, because as part of the context of the 40R process, you look at the other options available as part of your analysis. So I don't think we need a separate item for it. Or separate.
Okay, we'll
not a
wrap it
separate
in. We'll
presentation.
wrap it all up.
Yeah.
We'll wrap
gotcha.
all that into the same topic. Okay.
Ron, hold on, Ron. I'm sorry. Were we going to postpone the housing choice? We
So the
mentioned-
housing choice, Sue, we're trying to get Witten and Wilson. I think Wilson has agreed to sit in on our meeting and offer what he can. And I think John Witten, I think next meeting, that's true. That will be on our next meeting.
Okay,
Correct?
thank you.
Sorry, you're right. So those topics. All right. We're perfect on timing. And I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
I move by acclamation. We're adjourned.
All right.
Good
Good night,
Good
night.
night, everyone. See you next 2 weeks.
Ron, wait a minute,
Yeah,
Ron.
Thanks, Ron. See you, Elaine.
thank you.
Good night, Lauren. I can't tell which is means recording, the green one or the red one.
Run that by me again.
Okay, I have 2 little buttons up here, a green one and a red one, and then the word recording. So
I'm recording to the cloud, so Tiffany
That's
will get a
good.
copy of this. So
that's what I want to know, because somebody might want one.
yeah, no, Tiffany will have it. She gets all the recordings that went to the cloud, so that's what.
Perfect.
That's what it
Perfect,
is.
thank you so much. That's absolutely.
All right, Helene.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And yeah, get those minutes. They're all approved as you
Perfect.
wrote them.
Will do. We're
with
all up to
the-
date, by the way. We're up to date.
Well, first, yeah, just get Mary's grammatical things and
Oh,
clean
I
them
will.
up.
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.